right, y'all. We are back. Alpha Mentality Podcast. This is season 4, episode 1. Otis is fired up, as you can tell. Otis, how you feeling, man?
Man, you said it. I'm fired up. It's nice and rainy in SoCal. It
Nice.
reminds me a lot of back at home. How you feeling, man? We back. How you
We
feeling?
back. We back, but I don't like the rain, man. I'm looking outside my window. You say nice. I say depressing. When I was a teacher, I used to call off on rainy days, man.
Oh,
So I
rainy
don't know about.
days. I used to speed.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. You still speak, rainy or not. You're still doing something crazy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The Tesla don't drive as well because it got like the degraded view of it, man. But anyhow, how you been, man? It's been a minute since we've been back on these microphones. How's life been, man? Tell the people why we've been away so long.
We've been busy. We've been busy in business, and I've been busy in the bedroom. I am expecting another baby.
Okay.
I have another daughter due in July, man. So I'm fired up.
What'd you do to deserve be a two-time award-winning girl dad?
We don't talk about the past, but I am deserving. So here we are.
I thought we didn't talk about Bruno. Now you got 2 kids. Look at that, man. So I'm so excited for you. You got a lot of things that have been happening outside of that. You've hit some milestones in business. We got enough time. We'll celebrate that. But why don't we come to give the people what they're asking for, man? By the way, I think that everybody should know that the Alpha Mentality podcast is in 115 cities.
That's
And it
right.
is in 92 countries. Man, with or without us, you guys have been giving downloads, lots of love. We've been getting comments. I am so sorry that we have not been back a lot sooner. But how you feel about that? 92 countries?
90. I can't even name 92 countries. So to know that we're in that many countries, it's a trip, but very, very grateful, man. I know when we were looking at those stats and you told me, I said, what? 92. You're like, yeah, 92 countries according to the sheet. And I was like, wow. So really, really grateful for you guys, all that actually hit the play button, man. It means a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel the same exact way. So let's jump into it. So last we left off, we've been talking about a lot of mindset, like a lot of
Yeah.
approaches. We even mixed in a couple business concepts, financial concepts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that was uncanny of us, but we got a lot of response for that. And here on the
Yeah.
Alpha Mentality podcast, I think the things that are important to remember is that you got 2 guys who are probably on a similar or same track trajectory as you, where we've been growing something, where we've been building something. And what our job is to do is to remind you that we're not your gurus. Okay. We are
Right.
not your gurus. We are 2 guys that happen to have a slight bit of success, and we want to turn that back over to the public. So today we're going to be talking about, I think, probably one of the coolest topics, which is emotional intelligence and mastering that, right? So when you
Yeah.
first hear emotional intelligence, Jeff, there's an EQ, there's an IQ. Like, what do you
Right.
find are the similarities, or what do you maybe find are the differences?
I think there's a lot of differences because IQ is you're looking at the intelligence factor of things. EQ is very emotional, so it has a lot to do with emotions. Can you read a room? Do you know when to stop talking? Do you know how to react positively? Do you know how to react negatively? When is too much? It's just there's so much in depth, and I think sometimes they kind of cross paths a lot, obviously. But when you can master the emotional side of things, man, it makes the IQ really, really pop out a little bit more because I personally think EQ is actually what can help you lead, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree. I think most founders, CEOs of corporations, they would 100% agree with that. In fact, when you look at IQ from most companies or people who are even in the entrepreneur track, they
Mm,
think that you need to know everything first and then
right.
apply it second, which I think is completely the opposite, right? So for everybody in emotional intelligence doesn't mean you're soft, right? I think we should
Mm,
get that out to the audience. It doesn't mean that you need to seek some deep therapy, or you need to get hugs or get deep
yeah.
into your feelings. Emotional intelligence is not soft, but what it is that it's leverage, right?
Mm,
It's the unfair advantage that lets you control the room and read
mm,
the room the right way and respond to people, because generally people respond more to emotion
yep.
versus logic, right? So this episode it's not about sitting in a circle and crying and exchanging Kleenex or boogie wipes. This is about how to help this elevate where you are in business, or whether you're running your job, maybe you're looking for that next promotion, maybe you're just trying to get ahead in some certain area of your life. I
Yep.
surely think that this is going to be the weapon that's going to become the weapon of mass destruction when it talks about when you get ready to, launch yourself into the next atmosphere of your life, right? So
That's good. You hyping this episode. I like that. Weapon of Master Sight. This is good.
you like that one, right? I've been
Yeah.
practicing, man. I get my catchphrases and all of that stuff.
You'll
I'm
be in
just
the
kidding.
bathroom mirror just practicing for the podcast, huh?
I've been thinking about these guys for so long, right? So today we're going to be doing a lot of stuff like dismantling truths,
Mm.
interrogating some triggers. We're also going to in some things that fuse together that makes things a little bit confusing, right? So that we don't blur the lines or just cross them. We want to make
Yeah.
sure that apple stays to apples and oranges stays to oranges, right? So buckle in, because today we're going to talk about strategy, and the episode is going to help you not just fix things in your life, but bring things to a head that need to be exposed so that you can have the right tools that's going to be able to fix it, right? So first topic we're going to be discussing when we're talking about mastering emotional intelligence is dismantling some truths, right?
Mhm.
Dismantling some myths. So when it comes to dismantling some myths about emotional intelligence, Jeff, right? Let's have a discussion about that. What are some myths to come along with that?
That emotions make you soft, especially as a guy, right? It's
Yeah.
just one of those things where we're just gonna call it what it is. If you're emotional all the time, you're gonna be labeled as soft. But I think what the real core of this idea is more so that emotions are data, and however you want to handle it, however you go about it, is actually more important than having the emotion itself. Because I think what a lot of times what we do is we try to suppress emotions.
Yep.
When you think of alpha mentality, you're thinking of a dominant alpha male that doesn't show any type of emotion. And that's far from the truth. I remember I once heard this saying, like, the alpha wolf is not the one usually leading from the front, it's the one guiding the pack from
In
the
the
back.
back. That's true.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about a little about that, because, suppressing emotions, that's one of the things that we that often gets mislabeled, I would say. What do you think about that?
You know what? Just to kind of with the continuum on that, people ignore emotions because they think that it's a weakness, right?
Hmm.
So what they do is that they take everything and they bottle it up, right? They suppress rage, they 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 bury fear, right? But when they do this, it creates blind spots that then lead to ego, which is the real problem. It's the ego, right? So in like some businesses, right, that come to mind, I remember listening to the story of Uber. I forget the guy. I think his name was like Travis or something like that, right? But
Hmm.
Uber, they had a toxic culture, right? And their toxic culture was, I mean, you had harassment scandals, and this is known, right? So I'm not making this up, right? There were emotional leaks everywhere. And it was based on his leadership that this unchecked aggression, what it did was that it built speed, but it burnt bridges. So although Uber was building as a company, right? They grew and then they kind of blew up, so to say, right?
Hmm.
And then you look at other people like the IQ of like a Steve Jobs, right? Very brilliant, but he had poor collaboration in
Yeah.
terms of when it
Yeah.
came to, meeting minds and meeting people where they were. Because, again, you said it earlier, right? When people think about the Alpha Mentality podcast, they think there's two dudes on here who are dismantling myths about like women or something like that. No, this isn't. This is to help sharpen the mentality
Right.
on, approaching things different, right? So there's a whole bunch of different contrasts, right? But what I really much want to just say is that emotional intelligence is not weak, right? Emotional awareness is not, it's not soft. In fact, it's actually a strategic dominance that turns blind rage into a surgical strike.
Mm.
Whenever you're looking to find a way to elevate in life and elevate in business, right? So that's one of our first things, right? Is that we have to start dismantling the things that we believe are true, but they're not really that true. It's like the freaking boogeyman, right? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not even real, right? So that's the first topic, right? Out of 8 topics here, right? What's the second one? Why don't you go ahead and lead us into the second one?
So, second one we want to talk about is basically interrogating your core. And I want you guys to really sit on this idea, because deep down within you, there's emotions that you don't want to show. But in reality, those those emotions, those that are trying to suppress, maybe we might call it your triggers, they're
Yep.
actually in reality our own insecurities. I'll give you guys a story. When I remember when I first came into business, one of the things actually that Otis had told me, he was like, hey, you know what? You're going to have to talk to more people. Heads up, I'm the introvert. Okay. So talking to more people in my mind is like, nah, I'm good, man. Like, let me stay within my four walls. And I'll never forget this. You say, you know, if you don't talk to more people, you're gonna stay broke for the rest of your life. And I want you guys to really hear me when I say this, because the insecurity that I had was that I feared rejection. So the
Mm,
only reason I didn't want to do was the emotion of fear was creeping in. It was creeping in. So I want you to really think about, what emotions do you have that are actually costing you the most power in your life? Because
that's
we all have those emotions right now inside of us that, unless we learn how to control them, they're actually controlling us this entire time.
That's good. That's good. You know, we started off with this topic, a part of this about interrogating your core, and I
Mhm.
never heard it put so as a matter of fact, right? And it made me start thinking about how if you don't interrogate your core, then you start to trigger real insecurities,
Yeah,
if that
absolutely.
makes sense. And if you don't, like about triggers, let me go back to this because I need to get this point out while it's fresh in my mind. Your triggers, when they do happen, they're not random.
Hmm.
They're like maps to like a hidden weakness, if you so to say. So when
Yeah.
you do interrogate your core, it's just no different to be interrogated, right? I feel like these maps, they're hidden, and when you start to really focus, kind of like the first point, right, about dismantling, when you able to face this, right, it hits a little bit different because rejection, like you mentioned, it stings because of abandonments, right? You know, you didn't interrogate why you defined rejection as something, or you know, whatever it is making you feel a certain way, right? You lose this, right, and then you lose yourself. But there's a gap between, you know, being stimuli and then there's a response to that as well too. And I really want you to just kind of just finish up this point so we can move on to this, because you know, when you self audit these weaknesses, it
Hmm.
really makes a grand difference when you do have the opportunity to interrogate yourself.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. Let's just talk about self audit as a whole. If someone is willing and able to self audit, they have already unlocked the biggest key to controlling their emotions. See,
Mm,
most people, when they're triggered, they just react. They don't think about why they're reacting. Why does this bother me so much? Why does this make me so happy? Why do I feel this way when I come into this room? Why do I not want to talk to this person? Why do I really want to talk to this person? There's a reason behind all of it, but a lot of times we're just kind of living life, going through every single day, not realizing, not taking a step back and be like, okay, why is this happening? And when you start realizing, the self audit is not really so much a weakness, it can actually be your strength, because
uh,
most people, they just go through life unaware of everything that we just talked about.
you know, I got a challenge on that, right? For everybody that's listening right now, if you want to interrogate your core, I would just recommend that you track reactions in
Hmm,
your life for the next 7 days, right?
that's
So
good.
every trigger, every outburst, every time you freeze up, no excuses, just track this. And then bring that data or that intel in the next time that we talk. And then you're going to be able to see that there's patterns. And then these patterns are power when you break them. So it's almost like an inspect what you expect, right? So that's just a quick challenge for our audience, right? So I want to
I'm a
move on.
I'm gonna challenge Liz to check her road rage every time she gets verse to write it down. Why is that happening, Elizabeth?
No, that's funny. I was talking to my mom yesterday on the way here, and shout out to my mom, but she was in the car cursing, like, move, get out the way on some ludicrous type stuff, right? And I was like, wow. So maybe I'll tell my mom this, but my mom ain't gonna take my advice like that, right? I'm her son, right? So
This one either.
so moving on to topic number three, when we're talking about mastering emotional intelligence, is utilizing pressure as a catalyst. So
Mm-hmm.
let me explain to our audience that, you know, I think, Jeff, you talk about pressure, you know, making diamonds, right,
Mm-hmm.
or bursting a pipe, but
Mm-hmm.
pressure, it exposes, it doesn't build, because pressure doesn't create character, it just reveals it. Let me say
Yeah,
that
I like
again.
that.
Pressure, it reveals your character, right? In times of difficulty is where you find out that your destiny is shaped. Meaning, like in chaos, where most men and women panic, they fight, or they fight dirty, they freeze up, they flee, right? That fight or flight, right? But when you check your emotional intelligence, this can be an opportunity where if you inspect something, it can turn into fuel, right? So, in
Absolutely.
terms of pressure and it building up for you as a catalyst, right? Where would you say most people are not like finding blind spots when it comes to using pressure instead of letting pressure use them?
Well, I feel like the pressure actually exposes a person's identity a lot of the time. We all go through some rough times, but how do you react to it? How do you respond to it? Because for a lot of times, reacting and responding are two different things. See, when you react to something, it's just happening to you. But when you respond to something, you're
Mm,
already kind of prepared for it, right? It's no different than saying, "Hey, I have a stress response versus I have a trained response," right? I'll give you our business for example, prospecting. Let's say you get hit with some kind of objection, right? You're going to get a little stressed. So guess what your response is going to be? It's going to come from stress, which it already went wrong the wrong way for you. Versus a trained response, you get an objection. I was waiting for you to tell me that the whole time. Here's my response. It's trained. So it's going to really expose you when it comes down to the pressure moment. Are you prepared? Because the person that's prepared, man, it's game over.
I like that. I like that. I like that. Right. It's like, can you read a room in under 30 seconds? Right. If not, then you're in a blind fight. Right. So you have to start practicing these opportunities that exist. So that pressure is something that creates the diamond and doesn't make you go into the emergency room with exploded arteries or something like that. Right. So that's really good. That's really good. So moving on along, right? We got some points to deliver to you guys. We intend on doing that, right? Every time we get together, what our aim is to do is to be 25 minutes or less, right? So I hope you guys are, listening, taking mental notes or either written notes, right? So moving on to the next part is number 4 is utilizing empathy
Mm.
as a strategic advantage. So let me say something, and then I'm gonna turn this over to you because there's
Go
a
ahead.
difference, right? And
Big
I think
time.
you know where I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
There's a difference between sympathy and
Yeah.
empathy.
Yeah.
Okay, like difference. So what I just wanted to kind of get out here clear is is sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody, right? But then letting that sort of surround you and not uh help that person or help yourself, right? Because it's like, oh, I feel so bad, right? And then empathy is feeling it and still doing it, regardless of anything, right? So
Mhm.
when we're talking about this point here, in terms of empathy being a strategic advantage, right? What would you say to empathy? Not using sympathy, being a
Mhm.
strategic advantage in life, business, faith, family, all of that good stuff.
I just think empathy is awareness because when you're empathetic, you're aware that the person is feeling a certain way. Now, your job is okay, how can I put myself in their shoes and just feel what they're feeling so I can understand it, right? Understanding is very different than, feeling sorry, like you kind of mentioned. And I
Yep.
think that becomes very strategic because as a leader, you're going to have to kind of know where your people are coming from. In the world of business, let's say you have a client and your client is pissed off for whatever reason. Well, there's a reason they're feeling pissed off. Can you understand where they're coming from? Because if you can understand where you're coming from and put yourself in the position, well, if I was in their seat and that happened to me, would I feel the same way? Okay, maybe, hey, I get where you're coming from. And now you can work together toward a solution because you're putting yourself in their seat. And I think that's where empathy can have a very strong strategic advantage for the person that is aware of it.
I love it. I love it. I love what you said because it makes me think about, some of the great leaders of our country and has helped build this nation. And I think about Abraham Lincoln when he had to go through what he went through, right? Talking about Emancipation
Mm.
Proclamation, being a white man, getting ready to break up slavery and things of this nature, right? And at the time you're listening to this, by the way, it's Black History Month. I think our audience should know that, right? But what Abe Lincoln did is that underneath all of the scrutiny and the magnification that he was under, he stayed calm under pressure, right? He was mindful of other people's emotions and he navigated a civil war and without division or without losing control, right? So, empathy in this case is not just hugging people, right? It's
Mm,
like
it's good.
a military recognizance, right? Where you have to redefine it. So if you're listening to this, you have to be aware of your tone. And if you're watching this, you have to be aware of our posture, our energy, right? Because if you can go into a room and you can spot insecurity, right, which means somebody may have like a crossed arm, or
Mhm.
ambition and over eager, or in their eyes, or their ego is puffed out, then here's what you got to do. You have to find out who to validate, who to pressure, and who to sideline, right? Because you can really utilize, empathy to your advantage in every case and situation that you apply. Man, you can walk to a grocery store, you can go to a networking event, you can do whatever you do, right? But I think, again, having that as an advantage strategically is going to be the part where you do the most damage when you're trying to gain that extra like oomph in your deal here, right? So
You
number
know what's
five,
interesting?
go
Real
for it.
quick before you go on, it's interesting that you kind of mentioned tone. And for those of you guys that are, taking some notes, what I want you to think about tone, the easiest way you can think about this is you've all heard the saying, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
How you say it.
That's what we mean by having an empathetic tone. It's, hey, we can say this, me and Otis can say the exact same thing, but if I say it in a harsher tone, you're going to perceive it differently
Yep.
automatically. So just be very mindful of that, because that really goes a long way in how you say things to people. So
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Moving on to the next point, we got to talk about, which I think is probably my favorite point, which is forging alliances, right?
mm,
You have to forge the right alliances when we're talking about mastering intelligence, emotional intelligence, right? Versus the IQ. Because what alliance is going to do is that they're going to point out some of those blind spots. They're going to say, hey, Jeff, I know you got it kind of going on this way, but let me tell you something. I don't like the way you really did that, right?
mm,
And when we say forging alliances, we don't mean going begging people for their loyalty, right? You have to engineer your ability to like find people that are doing either the same as you or better than you, and start to, in a way, I don't want to say compete, more have a clarity amongst your group, what you're
yeah.
you're forming. Like, for instance, for us, there are things that we allow and there's things that we don't allow within our friend group, right? And
Mhm.
if you come here and you're just kind of doing some raggedy stuff when your character is out of line, then there's no way, right? But
Yeah.
if you're here, then you can count on somebody saying, hey, let me have a conversation with you, right? I don't think that this is the way to go about it, right? So forging ruthless alliances, what would you say to that?
I think when you are doing that, is that you got to be able to spot cracks early. You kind of mentioned it. If you come in here doing something sketchy, if we're not able to spot that early, then what are we doing?
Mm.
That means that our integrity now is a little tainted
You're
as
running a
well.
damn circus. That's what you're doing.
There you go. Right. So being able to kind of set the expectation, like, hey, this is what we do. And I think that goes back to reading a room, right? When you come into the friend group, and you have the new person to get introduced, can you tell very quickly, does this person vibe? Does this person have the integrity that we're looking for? How does that work? Right. And you know how that we always talk about, man, I just get a good vibe about that person.
Uh-huh.
That's an emotional intelligence thing. You can get vibes off people, you know exactly where things are going as well, right? And I think also, to add to that, you need to know when to, kind of correct things and when to cut things. That's also a big part, because if you're going to forge an alliance is something that's strong. It's a strong team. It's a strong group of people.
Yep.
You don't want weak links, because you're only as strong as the weakest link. So
Yep.
that's what I would add to that.
I love that. I love that the way that was stated, because a lot of us don't understand what it means to have alliances and what to do within those circles of alliances. So that's really good that you have that, right? So we got a few more minutes with these guys, because we really want to deliver, right, in terms of some of these points when it comes to mastering these, emotional intelligence, right? And the next thing that I'll have you guys write down is stripping communication down to the bare, right? Because
Mm,
when you're precise, you have more authority. I will never forget, I had a mentor in my life who said, like, you talk too much or you use too many words. And I
mm,
never I kind of understood it, but I didn't know like how to let that translate, right? And I'm gonna give you guys some points, but what he told me as a recommendation was to utilize words as if I had a character limit, kind of like Twitter, right? When you're
that's
putting it in, like the messages in, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how can you get this to that with a less amount of words? because over explaining, what it does is that it screams doubt. Fluff
Yeah.
also dilutes power, right? So what he told me was, Otis, speak with intention, be direct, be clean, and give people the truth because it's a lot quicker, right? So what you got to say to that? Because I know you got some things that you want to add on.
Yeah, I've always been the person that I'm like, hey, let's get to the point, get to the point. So I definitely love this one because I think when you have to kind of deliver some hard truths, you can't really over explain.
Nope.
Once you start over explaining something that has to be just, hey, let's just get to the point,
Yep.
you dilute it. It doesn't have the same meaning. And I think when you learn to just speak with intention, but also learning when to go silent, because sometimes silence is power. And I think oftentimes we over talk because we're trying to fill the dead space. And sometimes that dead space is trying to make a statement for a reason. And you just got to let it simmer in the air sometimes, man. So I think for me is if you can be clear in what you're saying and you just get straight to the point, that shows a lot of authority and who you are and what you have to say. And going along with that, it'll mean a lot more in the future when you speak.
Bro, I bet you 100% of our audience can relate to a point in time where they just talk too much,
Yeah,
right?
I think we
We
all
call
do.
it word salad or word vomit, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned in business was an acronym called WFA because I used to chat.
Yeah.
And WFA stands for wait for answers. So that means if you want to be intentional, you should state something and then just wait for an answer, right? Hitting that dead space is we could go into a whole lesson about this, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we got to keep this thing rolling because we want to stay on time. But another thing, right? This is point number 7 for all of us that's taking notes and listening, right? Is failure has a hidden code, and the hidden code, mastering your emotional intelligence. Actually, this is my favorite one. Okay, this is my favorite one.
Hmm.
Is that losing is intel? It's data. Most success is going to be involved with losing, not
Mhm.
winning. Okay. Anybody that has a level of success has more losses than failure, right? When you look at famous examples, Colonel Sanders, I think the dude did thousands and thousands of
Yeah.
times, right? And then he hit the recipe, right? You
And he
look
was
at
like 50 something too when he finally did that.
no, he's like 65, I think, right? Like,
Really?
yes, yes. When you look at Thomas Edison, it said that he had 10,000 times where he tried to do the light bulb, right? And then boom,
Mhm.
right? And there was a lot of intel in there, right? So the reason why I say that is because going back to an earlier point where we were discussing about, ego and things like that, right? Winning, if you win all of the time, it creates this superficial ego. And
Hmm.
ego responds to failure with blame, and growth responds with autopsy. Every setback is an opportunity that you can say, what emotion blinded me the most? Or what pattern was it that I was not picking up on? You know, if I shoot 1,000 jump shots and I shoot them the same way every single time, and I learn nothing, then I'm repeating these failures, but I'm not focused on the data. I'm not focused on the intel, right? So, can you name a time or two, maybe in your life, Jeff, where
Yeah.
you went through specific, like be specific as possible,
Okay.
where you looked at a loss and you went, man, I got something to learn from this?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you said that. The only thing that comes to my mind is I think clocking in every single day at when I used to work at Fresh and Easy. Okay, I
You
used to
worked
work
at Fresh and
graveyard.
Easy?
I worked at Fresh and Easy. Okay, I worked the graveyard shift. I worked from midnight to 5 a.m. and that alone was a loss in my life. And let me tell you why. I gave up a lot of my sleep to work that job. Okay,
Jeez.
but you know what it taught me was that when someone tells me I don't have time, I don't listen to that excuse. So let me explain. Let me explain. During this time, this was my senior year of college. This was my schedule for a whole semester. I worked from midnight to 5 a.m. I worked out from 5 a.m. to about 6:30. I went home. My first class was at 8:30 a.m. I would go to college from 8:30 to 4:20 p.m. I had basketball practice. I was basketball coach from 5 to 7 p.m. Eat dinner, get like 3 hours of sleep, and do it all over again until I had my 2 days off. So when people tell me I just don't have time, that time in my life that I lost a lot of time to do stuff was a time where I learned, don't listen to people's excuses. We make time for what we value. And I think that failure, if I can say, is a tuition, right? You either learn or you're going to keep repeating it. And at one point, I just walked out of that job like, all right, I'm wasting too much time here. It's time to do something else.
I love that, dude, because first of all, the audience listening, you can already tell he was a young man doing all of this. Because I'm doing the
Yeah.
math over here. I'm like, wait, what? How
Yeah.
the hell are you sleeping? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And it took me back to a moment where I can relate to that. I was working at Kohl's, I was working at Walmart, and I was working in general contracting. And it was the same type of situation where I was like, I don't want this to be my life. Like, but I took data that now I can use for clear present day that says that I paid the price and I no longer have to do that because, I just decoded everything that I wanted, right? And I evolved faster than most people who are around me, right? So
Hmm.
that's a great share. That's a great
I
share. I
appreciate
didn't
that.
even I didn't even know that, right? Fresh and easy. You look like a fresh and easy guy. All right.
I'm wearing the
Paper.
colors too to top it off.
That's crazy, right? So I'll let you lead us out of here with the last point. Go ahead, number 8.
So, the last one is the paradox, guys. The alpha paradox. What does that mean? How do you get emotional, but to also equate it to leadership? And I think that's a lot of the times where we don't really see the connection. Let me explain. I want you to think about leadership in its whole, right? I think when you're an employee, we think leadership is management. I think back to my time again working at when I worked at Finish and I worked at Fresh and Easy. The people who would quote unquote lead me, which were the managers, my bosses, there was a level of aggression sometimes when they would tell you what to do. And oftentimes what that actually does is it actually burns bridges, right? Why? Because emotional awareness is lacking at that point. That's not really how you can lead someone. And what that does is trust collapses. Now being in this space where you actually have to learn, it starts to make me realize that the only way you can actually lead someone is actually being calm under pressure, actually building the relationships, actually having connections. It's not the person that's louder, it's the person that's steadier, that's actually able to get the positive, the correct message across, if I may. I don't know if you want to add to that, but that's kind of how I see it. I think back to all my examples that I've had of leadership, quote unquote, in my past jobs.
No, I definitely want to add on to that. You're getting me excited over here with, just having this as the paradox, right? Raw aggression without control, it burns bridges. And emotional intelligence without strength, it collapses. So if you want to fuse those two together, then you need stability. Going back to Abraham Lincoln when I talked about how he was able to be calm, you have to be calm in your presence under fire. That gut feeling, it's leading you in the right direction. You said it
Mm.
earlier just a few seconds ago, but real leadership isn't louder, right? You said it, it's steadier. So you have to sense shifts and adapt in real time. But there's no way you can do that not unless you're practicing this, right? With the intel, right? So you have to command things without shouting. So my call to action for everybody that's listening right now is to audit yourself today. What are the reactive, where are you reactive instead of strategic? You have to find a way to measure and master that gap. And then you can lead a lot more effectively, right? And if this hits today with everybody that's listening, I want you guys to share your testimony to us, right? Share your biggest trigger or takeaway. Tag us, talk to us, right? We're here, On our next episode, we're absolutely going to go a lot deeper, right? But I think what's really important is these 8 points when it comes to mastering emotional intelligence and then understanding what are the what are the variations between my EQ and my IQ? Like, where do these hit different, right? I think I would land a plane and just say, we have to make sure we audit these things, inspect what you expect, because there's no way you can go to the next level putting up as much jump shots as I'm talking about, and you're not stopping to look at the data, stopping to look at these things along the way that helps you become more effective and more efficient, and not just business. I know we're a business, conversation, but in life, just in general.
Yeah, that's it. That's episode 1, season 4 of the Alpha Mentality Podcast. We're back. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.
Adios.